What if I told you the most significant military disruption of the 21st century didn't happen with stealth bombers or aircraft carriers, but in a dusty, forgotten workshop with parts scavenged from a junkyard? In the heart of West Africa, a young captain, cornered and choked by the world's superpowers, unleashed a secret that sent tremors through the CIA, the Élysée Palace, and MI6. This isn't just a story about homemade drones. This is the classified account of how a nation on its knees built wings from scrap and, in doing so, humiliated a billion-dollar war machine. The story they tried to bury. If you've ever felt underestimated, if you know what it's like to fight back when the world has counted you out, do me a favor and hit that like button. You're part of this story too. It began not on a battlefield, but in the polished boardrooms of Brussels, where the fates of nations are decided over fine espresso and whispered consensus. The target was a defiant young leader in Burkina Faso who had committed the ultimate sin. He chose true independence. There would be no invasion, no bombs dropping from the sky. The weapon this time was quieter and far more cruel. Economic asphyxiation. Cut off their funding, one strategist ordered, his voice echoing the sterile confidence of untouchable power. Block all defense imports. Halt spare parts. Freeze everything. The playbook was brutally simple. Paralyze the military, demoralize the people, and bring the leader to his knees. It had worked before in nations that dared to dream of sovereignty. But they overlooked one crucial detail. They saw a nation in the crosshairs. They didn't see the fire burning beneath the surface. Deep under the streets of Ouagadougou, in workshops that smelled of solder, oil, and pure resolve, something impossible was taking shape. An answer they never saw coming. Forget Silicon Valley's gleaming campuses and their billion-dollar research labs. The future wasn't being forged in Palo Alto. It was being born in a cramped, sweltering basement deep beneath the streets of Ouagadougou, a place that bore no resemblance to the sterile environments of Western innovation, but burned with a creative fire that was far more intense. The air was thick with the metallic tang of solder, the smell of engine oil, and something else, the unmistakable scent of raw, unyielding resolve. Flickering fluorescent lights cast long, dancing shadows across walls covered not with whiteboards and corporate jargon, but with hand-drawn schematics, complex equations scrawled on stained pieces of cardboard. These weren't engineers from MIT or Stanford, groomed by a system of privilege. These were the ghost mechanics, the men who could keep a 30-year-old tractor running on prayer and scavenged parts. They were the self-taught coders who learned Python from tattered textbooks fished from dusty market stalls. They were women, often overlooked, hunched over laptops with cracked screens, powered by daisy-chained car batteries because the city's power grid was a casualty of the economic war being waged against them. These weren't just technicians, they were technological insurgents, fighting a war of liberation with soldering irons and lines of code. I want you to think about that for a moment. Wherever you're watching this from, maybe it's late at night in your quiet home, or on your lunch break in a bustling city. Just feel the weight of the phone or laptop in your hands. Now imagine having to invent something just as groundbreaking, not with unlimited resources, but with nothing but what others threw away. If you respect that raw, unbreakable spirit of creation against all odds, take a second and comment the word "build" down below. Let's fill the comments with a testament to these unsung geniuses. Their creation was a Frankenstein's monster of ingenuity. They named it Sira, which means the path forward in the local language. Its frame wasn't molded carbon fiber. It was plastic tubing, heated and bent by hand. Its brain wasn't a state-of-the-art microprocessor. It was a circuit board cannibalized from a dozen broken radios and discarded cell phones. Its all-seeing eye was the ultimate act of poetic justice, a lens carefully extracted from a captured, dismantled French surveillance drone that had once spied on them from above. A car battery, heavy and crude, gave it life. The paint job was brushed on by hand. The wires stuck out at odd angles. It would never pass a single Western safety inspection. It was ugly. It was imperfect. And it was beautiful. The day of the first test flight was suffocatingly tense. In that hidden lot on the edge of the city, failure felt more likely than success. The rotors began to spin, kicking up a storm of red dust. It wobbled, it groaned, and then it lifted. It clawed its way into the sky, a clumsy, defiant speck against the vast African blue. For 3 minutes, it flew. Its range was barely over a mile. The footage it sent back was grainy, distorted by the makeshift antenna. But to the small group of patriots watching from below, tears streaming down their faces, it wasn't grainy footage. It was a masterpiece. It was a declaration of independence written in the sky. It was proof that they could not be broken. The report landed on President Traoré's desk hours later. His office had no gold trim, no marble columns, just a simple wooden desk, a shelf of worn books, and a single photo of his grandmother who once told him, "Dignity is never given. It is earned." The lead engineer, a man in his 50s with hands permanently stained with grease, could barely contain his emotion. "Mr. President," he stammered, "it flies. It sees. It records." Traoré didn't pump his fist. He didn't call a press conference. He just nodded once, his eyes filled with a terrifying calm, and asked the question that would change the course of modern warfare. "What do we need to build 10 more?" Word of Sira's flight spread through Africa's underground like wildfire. Not through official communiques or embassy cables, but through the old resistance networks, encrypted texts, whispered meetings in crowded markets. A single, grainy photograph passed from one trusted hand to another. In the West, defense contractors laughed. Over cocktails in Dubai and Washington, D.C., they scoffed. Africans building drones? They can't even maintain the multi-million-dollar equipment we sell them. But in the quiet, climate-controlled corridors of Langley, London, and Paris, the laughter died very quickly. Satellites, programmed to ignore such insignificant territories, began flagging anomalies. Strange heat signatures from unregistered workshops. New, encrypted radio frequencies blooming over Ouagadougou, where there should have been only silence. Then came the images, blurry at first, then sharper. Small, unknown aircraft flying near restricted zones. The internal memo was short, cold, and unsettling. Unidentified aerial activity detected. Likely domestically produced. Capabilities unknown. Recommend immediate assessment. France, the former colonial power, a nation that still saw West Africa as its backyard, moved first. They couldn't ignore the raw implication. A former subject was innovating outside of their control. Within days, a delegation of trade officials landed in Ouagadougou. Their polished leather briefcases and diplomatic smiles were a mask. Their real mission: assess the threat, contain the narrative, and reassert control by any means necessary. Among them was a man who introduced himself as a cultural attaché, an expert in art and history. In reality, he was a seasoned operative from the DGSE, France's external intelligence agency, a specialist in technological espionage. His methods were surgical: identify the brightest minds and either recruit them or neutralize them. His target was a 23-year-old engineer named Abu. Brilliant with electronics, humble to a fault, and supporting a family of 6 on wages that wouldn't cover an appetizer in the cafe where they were scheduled to meet. The venue was chosen to disarm and intimidate. A chic cafe with mismatched furniture, trying desperately to mimic a Parisian bistro, a place where the city's tiny western-facing elite came to be seen. The Frenchman ordered in crisp, flawless English, a subtle power play. He slid a business card across the table. "You're wasting your talent here, Abu," he began, his voice a smooth, seductive melody. "Europe has real labs, real funding. You wouldn't need to be soldering wires salvaged from a dump, praying nothing fails mid-flight." He leaned in, his eyes locking onto Abu's. "We know about the drone project. We're impressed. But you don't have to keep building in a basement. You deserve more." He painted a picture of a life Abu could only dream of: prestigious research grants, global recognition, a spacious apartment in Lyon, freedom from the sanctions and scarcity that choked his homeland. And right there, Abu faced a crossroads that defines a person's soul. A choice between a comfortable, golden cage and a difficult, sovereign freedom. Before I tell you what he did, I want you to put yourself in his shoes. Be honest. If you were him, holding the weight of your family's future in your hands, what would you choose? Comment freedom if you believe you would have stayed, or fortune if that offer would have been too much to resist. There's no judgment, just a moment of truth between us. The Frenchman, seeing hesitation, pressed his advantage. His smile tightened. "This country is pretending to be sovereign. And you're building weapons out of trash, guided by hope and sunlight. What exactly do you think you're accomplishing?" Abu didn't flinch. He took a slow sip of his tea, the silence stretching for an eternity. Then he reached into his pocket and pulled out a battered phone, its screen cracked and held together with tape. He opened a video and slid it across the table. On the screen, Sira was in flight. Not wobbly, not clumsy, but smooth, stable, scanning the countryside with a clarity that defied its humble origins. "This," Abu said, his voice quiet but as solid as bedrock, was built by people who understand the difference between dependency and partnership, between imitation and true innovation. He stood, placing a few worn bills on the table for his tea. "Thank you for the coffee. And thank you," he added, looking the operative dead in the eye, "for reminding me exactly why we are building these in the first place." He walked away, and with him walked the West's first and best chance at control. The stunned operative made a single, frantic call. The message was relayed up the chain of command. Overnight, the posture of Western intelligence changed. Burkina Faso's drone program was no longer a curiosity. It was a threat. This wasn't a hobby. It was a grassroots technological revolution. And it was spreading. The French operatives' panicked report lit a fire under Western intelligence, but in the underground workshops of Ouagadougou, it was like pouring jet fuel on an already raging inferno. The pressure didn't break them. It forged them into something harder, faster, and smarter. Where once there had been a desperate struggle for survival, now there was the thrill of creation. The work intensified. The second prototype was pushed forward at a punishing pace. Generations of suppressed ingenuity, of being told they were only consumers, were erupting like a dormant volcano. But the true breakthrough, the quantum leap that would elevate their project from a clever curiosity to a geostrategic threat, came not from a decorated engineer, but from the quietest corner of the workshop. It came from a woman who rarely spoke, a former mathematics teacher who had been forced to drive a taxi to feed her family after education budgets were gutted by the very sanctions they were now defying. Her weapon wasn't a soldering iron. It was a laptop that was once considered e-waste, and a mind that saw patterns where others saw only chaos. She had been quietly working on a problem that haunted even the most advanced military planners in the Pentagon, the Achilles heel of all modern warfare, GPS. Every billion-dollar drone, every smart bomb, every soldier on the ground relies on that invisible thread connecting them to a satellite constellation controlled by a handful of global powers. It is a leash, and in a time of conflict, that leash can be tightened, scrambled, or cut entirely. A $10 million drone can become a $10 million brick falling from the sky with a single command. It is the ultimate vulnerability, a flaw embedded in the very heart of Western military doctrine. Her solution was an act of pure, elegant genius. It was born from a reality where you could never trust that the sky would be friendly. Instead of relying on a single fragile link to a satellite, her algorithm wove together a tapestry of redundant navigation systems. It was like teaching the drone not just to read a digital map, but to navigate by the sun, the stars, and the memory of the landscape itself. It used GPS when available, but the moment it was jammed, an inertial guidance system took over, feeling its own motion like the inner ear of a human. Simultaneously, its camera would cross-reference the terrain below with a stored map, recognizing the curve of a river or a specific road junction, visual landmark recognition. If all else failed, it could even use minute readings of the Earth's magnetic field to hold its course. Each system was a fail-safe for the others. This is a different kind of brilliance, isn't it? It's not about having the most expensive components, but having the most unbreakable idea. What time is it where you are right now? I don't care if it's 3 in the morning or 3 in the afternoon. I want you to comment the exact time below. Let it be a timestamp for the moment you realize that true, world-changing innovation doesn't come from a billionaire's budget, but from the resilience of the human spirit. This philosophy, do more with less, do it smarter, make it unbreakable, was woven into every part of the new drone. Its power systems were a hybrid of lightweight solar panels on its wings and hyper-efficient batteries, dramatically extending its flight time. Its aerodynamics were refined for stealth, making it quieter and harder to detect. Its communications weren't just on one frequency, but used multi-band encrypted transmissions that hopped channels, making them nearly impossible to intercept or jam. This wasn't a cheap replica of a Reaper drone. It was something else entirely. It was a creature evolved for survival in a hostile world, a system that would have cost a Western defense firm hundreds of millions to develop. President Traoré received the update during one of his regular, unpublicized visits. No media, no security entourage. He walked through the concrete-floored workshop, the quiet sound of progress humming around him. He listened intently as the lead engineer explained the advancement, his eyes sharp, missing nothing. "We've tested the new system, Mr. President," the engineer said, his voice thick with pride. He pointed to a screen showing complex telemetry. "We can simulate a total GPS blackout. We can simulate a full-spectrum electronic attack. He paused, letting the weight of his next words settle in the hot, humid air. If they try to blind us from the sky, if the GPS goes dark, Syrah keeps flying. Traoré looked at the team, the mechanic, the teacher, the coder, the student, all standing side by side. He saw people who had been told their only role was to consume what others created. And in that moment, he wasn't just looking at a drone. He was looking at the physical manifestation of sovereignty. He was looking at a future where his nation would no longer be on a leash. They were just getting started, and their greatest test was coming sooner than any of them could imagine. The night of the quiet revolution came without warning. He had a habit of arriving unannounced, often in the evenings, moving through the workshops like a ghost. While other leaders wrapped themselves in layers of protocol and armored convoys, President Ibrahim Traoré would simply walk in, pour himself a cup of tea from the communal pot, and listen. He didn't just listen, he understood. He asked technical questions that showed he grasped both the immense obstacles they faced and the earth-shattering implications of their breakthroughs. But all of that was preparation. The real test came not in a workshop, but in the desolate, starless dark of the northern border. In the early hours of the morning, while the world slept, a convoy of unmarked, military-grade vehicles slipped across the border. No authorization, no warning. It was a probe, a classic intelligence operation designed to test response times, map out radar blind spots, and gauge the defensive readiness of a nation they believed was crippled and deaf. The operators in that convoy moved with the arrogant confidence of predators entering a territory they believed was theirs to command. What they didn't know was that Syrah 3.0 had been patrolling that very sector for weeks. High above, miles in the cold, thin air where the air is too thin to carry sound, a silent guardian was watching. This new drone was a quantum leap forward. Longer flight time, thermal optics that could see a man's body heat from 3 miles away, and most critically, full autonomy. It didn't just fly missions, it hunted. Its software, designed by the same minds in the same basement, flagged the incursion instantly. Heat signatures, vehicle classifications, movement patterns, all cross-referenced against known civilian activity in milliseconds. The system's conclusion flashed on a screen miles away in Ouagadougou: hostile incursion. Passive tracking engaged. In the command center, a single, piercing alert cut through the quiet hum of progress. A screen flickered to life. The room went silent. Jaws dropped. The footage was breathtakingly clear, a high-definition stream of blacks, whites, and grays. They could see the make of the vehicles, the type of antennas they used, the number of soldiers in each truck. The resolution was astonishing, rivaling the billion-dollar systems used by the world's superpowers, but it was being generated by a drone that cost less than a new pickup truck. President Traoré was awakened with the news. He arrived at the center within minutes, a figure of absolute calm in a sea of adrenaline. He took in the data, his eyes scanning every detail on the screens. He asked one word: options. The drone operator, a young woman barely out of university, took a deep breath. Her voice was steady, betraying none of the chaos she felt. "We can track them indefinitely, Mr. President. They have no idea we're here. We can record their every move, their communications, their destination. We can build a complete intelligence profile." She paused, and the weight of that pause filled the entire room. Or, Traoré turned his full attention to her. "The targeting system is fully functional. We could engage." The moment hung in the air, thick and heavy. This was it, the decision that would define their entire struggle. To strike would be to send an unambiguous message across the globe: Burkina Faso is no longer defenseless. But it would also be an act of war, validating every fear whispered in the corridors of Paris and Washington. It would change everything. This is the ultimate test of power. Not just having it, but how you choose to wield it. The fate of a nation hangs in this moment of silence. I want you to type the number 1 in the comments if you believe the only answer is to strike back, to send an undeniable message of force. Or type the number 2 if you believe true strength lies in showing you have the power, but choosing not to use it. Let's see what this community believes defines real power. Traoré finally spoke, his voice quiet but absolute, cutting through the tension like a razor. "No." He let the word hang in the air for a second before continuing. "We observe. We document everything. Let them know we can see them, but we do not engage unless they pose an immediate threat to our people." It was a masterstroke of strategic genius. In that single act of restraint, Traoré demonstrated both terrifying capability and profound control. The message was infinitely more powerful than any explosion. It wasn't just "we can fight back." It was "we see your every move. We can touch you whenever we choose. We hold your lives in our hands from miles above your head, and you are utterly blind. And we are choosing to let you live. We are not you." In the world's intelligence agencies, alarms didn't just ring. They screamed. Not because of what Syria had done, but because of what it had so calmly, so powerfully chosen not to do. President Traoré's decision not to strike wasn't tactical restraint. It was strategic brilliance. The real power of the drone program wasn't its capacity to destroy, but its capacity to observe, to document, and to produce a truth so undeniable it could shatter narratives from thousands of miles away. In an era where a single, verifiable video clip often outweighs an entire fleet of battleships, the ability to see and show had become the ultimate currency of power. For 6 continuous hours, Syria 3.0 was a silent, invisible god in the sky, tracking the convoy's every move. But the most telling moment came when the intruders realized they were being watched. Their disciplined formation broke. Panic erupted. You could see it in the frantic movements, the way they scanned the empty sky with advanced detectors. But they saw nothing. Syria was designed not to be impressive, but to be invisible. Then came the masterstroke. Within 48 hours, the footage appeared online. Not in a clumsy data dump, but a surgical leak. It was seeded simultaneously onto obscure military intelligence forums, encrypted networks used by journalists, and African social media platforms. It was untraceable, deniable, and utterly devastating. The response in Western defense circles was immediate and visceral. For decades, the global order had been built on the quiet, arrogant assumption that certain technologies, and the power they conferred, were the exclusive domain of a select few. Now, that illusion was collapsing in real time. Heated, panicked debates erupted in defense summits from Brussels to Washington. How had a landlocked, embargoed nation developed this? How had engineers with no formal Western training built systems that rivaled the outputs of Lockheed Martin, Thales, and BAE Systems? What if this wasn't an anomaly? What if this was just the beginning? The official reaction was swift, predictable, and a historic miscalculation. They tightened the sanctions. Every export even remotely related to electronics, software, or aviation was red-flagged. It was a desperate attempt to build a technological wall around an entire continent. But instead of suppressing the movement, they poured gasoline on it. The story of Syria became a legend. University students in Dar es Salaam, Tanzania, launched competitions focused on indigenous drone design. Research institutions in Nairobi, Accra, and Addis Ababa began collaborating directly with their counterparts in Ouagadougou, sharing data through newly created, highly encrypted networks. A new ecosystem of African venture funds emerged, specifically backing startups designed to be free from the poison pill of Western supply chains. The model pioneered in that Ouagadougou basement had become a blueprint for liberation. Engineers from Ghana to Malawi began adapting the techniques: salvage parts, decentralized R&D, open-source coding, and locally sourced materials. This is how a real revolution spreads. Not from a single command, but when an idea becomes a shared fire that is too big for anyone to extinguish. Think about the most powerful idea you've ever shared with someone. A piece of advice, a skill, a dream. What was it? Share a piece of that story in the comments below, because in that moment, you were part of this exact same unstoppable process. The power of shared knowledge is the one force they can never truly sanction. The revolution quickly moved beyond the battlefield. The technology branched out, seeding itself into the fabric of civilian life. Agricultural drones, using the same resilient navigation systems, monitored crop health and pest patterns, dramatically increasing food yields. Environmental drones tracked illegal logging and poaching in vast national parks, giving local rangers a fighting chance. Public health drones delivered life-saving medical supplies to remote villages unreachable by road, arriving in hours instead of days. Each new application was another brick in the wall of sovereignty, proving that innovation didn't need to be imported. It could emerge from local needs and solve local problems with more precision and affordability than any foreign solution. The transformation was not just technological, it was psychological. For the first time in generations, young Africans looked at cutting-edge innovation and saw themselves. The engineers once dismissed as tinkerers had become continental heroes. Delegations from Bangladesh, Bolivia, and Myanmar began arriving in Ouagadougou. They didn't come bearing aid, they came to learn. They came to understand how a nation pushed to the absolute margins had created not just a viable alternative, but in many ways, a superior solution. The West had tried to build a wall to keep Burkina Faso in. Instead, they had built a beacon that showed the rest of the world the way out. The workshops in Ouagadougou hum day and night now, but they're filled with more than just drones. Teams are developing portable diagnostic devices for rural clinics, solar grids tailored for village needs, learning tools for schools without electricity. What began as a tactical response to sanctions has blossomed into a continental renaissance. The drone program was never the end goal, it was the spark. It was the proof of concept that shattered a century of internalized doubt. The most profound legacy of the SIRA program isn't the technology. It's the psychological revolution it ignited. A generation of young Africans, long taught to look to the West for answers, is now looking inward to each other. They have seen with their own eyes that genius is not tied to geography or wealth. This is a story about the courage to defy the narrative written for you and to create your own. It is the ultimate act of self-determination. If you believe in the fundamental right to build your own wings, to choose your own destiny, then make your voice heard. Hit that subscribe button and join a community that celebrates these stories of courage and ingenuity. Let's continue to uncover the truth together. The old powers tried to build walls to imprison a nation. But Ibrahim Traoré and his people taught the world a simple, powerful lesson. You cannot cage the human spirit. They didn't just build drones. They built wings. And now, an entire continent is learning how to fly.